In a children's hospital, a dedicated professional silently fights to balance her own pain while saving lives. When a traumatized child resists any contact, an unexpected gesture breaks through the wall of silence. The connection between them grows like an invisible thread of mutual healing and unspoken memories. But when the young patient's health suddenly worsens, a shocking discovery puts everything at risk. If this story interests you, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The corridors of St. Hope Children's Hospital in Brighton Hill daily witnessed the hurried comings and goings of Caroline Adams. At 28, she was one of those people everyone needed, but few truly saw. The dedicated nurse whose silent presence brought comfort in moments of despair, but whose name was rarely remembered. Caroline lived alone in a small apartment in St. Helens Quarter, near the hospital. The broken elevator forced her to climb 5 flights of stairs after exhausting shifts. The space was simple but clean, with a small balcony where she cultivated medicinal herbs. Her life was divided between the hospital and college, where she was in her final year of nursing, thanks to a partial scholarship she had earned with great effort. The apartment, though modest, consumed a good portion of her salary. Caroline supplemented her income by working extra shifts and, on weekends, sold homemade chocolate truffles at the neighborhood market. Her hands, always gentle with patients, had calluses disguised by procedure gloves. Her uniform, though impeccably clean, already showed signs of excessive wear on the seams. Anyone who saw her entering the hospital at 6 in the morning, with her curly hair pulled back in a bun, would never guess she had slept only 4 hours. Caroline never complained, not for lack of reasons but by choice. Silence had become her refuge since the abrupt departure of her sister Bianca 3 years prior. Bianca had been her pillar during a difficult childhood in Crystal Brook, rural Appalachia. Daughters of an absent father and an overwhelmed mother, the two sisters created a private world made of invented stories and songs that lulled them to sleep on nights without dinner. When Bianca fell ill, Caroline, still a teenager, found her purpose in medicine. Her sister's passing transformed that desire into a mission. Pediatrics was a natural choice. There, among children with frightened eyes and desperate parents, Caroline found meaning. Perhaps because by caring for them, she could also care for the child who still lived within her, the girl who hadn't been able to save her sister. It was on a rainy June morning, typical of an Appalachian winter, that everything began to change. Michael Taylor, a man of imposing presence, walked the corridors with a grim expression. CEO of the country's largest bookstore chain, Pages and Tales, Michael was known as much for his business success as for his discreet philanthropy. He had financed the hospital's new children's wing years ago, but rarely appeared except in recent months. The reason for his frequent visits was Isadora, his 4-year-old daughter. The girl had been hospitalized for weeks with a persistent respiratory condition that doctors were still trying to decipher. Since the passing of Marina, his wife, 6 months earlier, Isadora had withdrawn into her own world, where words were scarce and smiles non-existent. That morning, as Caroline organized medications in the nursing station, she heard screams coming from room 207. Isadora was having a crisis again. Without thinking twice, Caroline left the medications and ran down the corridor. Upon arriving, she found the familiar scene: doctors trying to calm the girl, nurses preparing medication, and little Isadora, with her dark curls and pale skin, struggling and crying in the hospital bed. Her gaze met that of Dr. Renee Collins, the physician in charge of the case. "We've already administered the anxiolytic, but she's not responding," the doctor said, her voice tense. "Her father is on his way." Caroline observed the scene for a few seconds. Conventional methods were clearly not working. Without asking permission, she approached the bed and, instead of trying to restrain the girl, sat in the armchair beside her. She began to sing softly, an old melody Bianca used to sing to her when they had nightmares. "The moon arrives ever so slowly, bringing sweet dreams to lull." The medical team paused to watch, surprised by the unorthodox approach. Caroline's voice, soft and melodious, began to fill the room. It wasn't a technically perfect voice, but it carried something that transcended technique, an authenticity born of her own pain. Isadora continued crying, but her movements became less abrupt. Her eyes, previously tightly closed, slowly opened and fixed on Caroline. The nurse continued singing without averting her gaze, creating a silent connection between them. The song spoke of stars, of protected dreams, and of the dawn that always comes even after the darkest night. Gradually, the girl's sobs diminished. The medical team, noticing the improvement, discreetly retreated. In minutes, what seemed impossible happened. Isadora extended her small hand and touched Caroline's arm, as if to confirm she was real. It was the first voluntary contact the girl had initiated since her hospitalization. What Caroline didn't notice was the presence of Michael Taylor, standing at the door of the room, silently observing everything. The businessman, always controlled and formal, felt something break inside him. The song Caroline was singing was a version of the same melody Marina used to sing to Isadora every night. In the following days, Caroline was assigned to specially care for Isadora. The girl, though still not speaking, seemed calmer in the nurse's presence. She responded with small gestures when Caroline told her stories or hummed while organizing medications. The medical team noticed the change and informally began calling Caroline whenever Isadora showed signs of agitation. Michael, in turn, adjusted his routine to be present during Caroline's shift. He observed the interaction between the nurse and his daughter with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Always discreet, he limited himself to formal greetings and technical questions about Isadora's condition. Caroline responded with the same formality, though she felt the weight of his gaze following her movements. One afternoon, while everyone else was at lunch, Caroline remained with Isadora, who refused to eat. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she told stories about a girl who traveled through the clouds on a magic umbrella. To her surprise, the little patient picked up the spoon and, listening attentively, began to eat the mashed potatoes she had previously rejected. It was at that moment that Michael entered, carrying some documents and his laptop. He stopped at the sight, surprised by the progress. Caroline, embarrassed, tried to get up, but Isadora gripped her hand tightly. "Please continue," Michael said, his voice hoarse. "I've been trying for weeks to get her to eat properly." Caroline nodded, continuing her story while helping Isadora with her meal. Michael sat in a corner, pretending to work on his laptop, but his eyes constantly drifted to the interaction between the two. When Isadora finally fell asleep, Caroline arranged the blankets around her and prepared to leave silently. "Miss Adams," Michael called out softly, "could you spare a few minutes?" In the corridor, away from Isadora's ears, Michael seemed uncomfortable, as if words were strange objects in his hands. "What you did today, and in recent days, has been extraordinary," he finally said. "Isadora hasn't responded like this to anyone since a very long time." Caroline felt the unspoken weight in his words. She knew the history. Everyone at the hospital knew that Marina Taylor had passed away after a prolonged illness, leaving Michael and Isadora devastated. "I only did what anyone would do," she replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "Children sometimes need different approaches." "No," Michael insisted, with an intensity that surprised her. "It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. The song you sang the other day, it was special to her." Caroline felt a lump in her throat. She didn't mention that it was also special to her, that she carried that melody like a talisman from her time with Bianca. "I'm glad it helped," she said simply. The next morning, Caroline arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. She had slept poorly, bothered by memories of Bianca and thoughts of Isadora. The two girls somehow intertwined in her dreams. Upon opening her locker in the changing room, she found an unexpected package. It was a simple box, wrapped in brown paper with no card or identification. Hesitantly, she opened it and found a state-of-the-art stethoscope, far superior to the old one she used, an inherited instrument from a retired colleague. She looked around, confused. The changing room was empty at that hour. She examined the package again, looking for a clue until she noticed a small note hidden in the wrapping. A single handwritten sentence on Pages and Tales letterhead, "For someone who truly listens." Caroline spent the entire day with the new stethoscope tucked away in her bag. She didn't feel comfortable using something so expensive and personal. She even considered returning it, but didn't know how to approach Michael without causing embarrassment. The shift was particularly difficult. In addition to Isadora, there were new patients. including a boy who had arrived in the emergency room with symptoms similar to those Bianca had shown at the beginning of her illness. Caroline fought against the memories as she cared for him, her hands trembling as she administered medications. It was Julia, a veteran nurse and Caroline's friend, who noticed her state. "You look pale," she observed as they organized patient charts. "Did something happen?" Caroline hesitated. Julia was one of the few people who knew her history with Bianca. The new patient in 210 reminds me of her, she finally admitted. And there was something else. She told her about the mysterious gift, showing Julia the stethoscope, who whistled in impressment. "This model costs more than our monthly salary," Julia commented. "And you're sure it was Mr. Taylor?" "The paper was from his company." "Carol," Julia leaned in, speaking softer. "Be careful. Michael Taylor may be a hospital benefactor, but he's also a powerful and reserved man. Since his wife passed, no one sees him at social events. He practically lives between his company and this hospital. Do you think I should return it?" "I'm not saying that," Julia replied thoughtfully. "I'm just saying not to get your hopes up. Men like him live in another world." Those words echoed in Caroline's mind for the rest of the day. It was true. She and Michael Taylor belonged to completely different universes. She struggling to pay rent and finish college, he running one of the country's largest bookstore chains, frequenting circles she only knew from magazines in the waiting room. But there was Isadora. The girl created an unexpected bridge between these two worlds. At the end of her shift, Caroline finally gathered the courage to use the stethoscope. Isadora's heartbeats, previously a distant echo through the old equipment, now sounded clear and strong in her ears. The technology made a difference, allowing her to detect nuances that would have gone unnoticed before. When she finished the examination, she noticed Michael at the door, watching. Their eyes met briefly, and Caroline saw something in them she couldn't decipher. A mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more complex. That night, leaving the hospital, Caroline was caught in a torrential rain. Without an umbrella and facing a long wait for the bus, she prepared to get soaked on her way to the stop. She was about to run through the rain when a black car pulled up smoothly to the curb. The passenger window lowered, revealing Michael Taylor at the wheel. "May I offer you a ride?" he asked, as formal as ever. Caroline hesitated. Julia's words echoed in her mind, but the rain was intensifying, and the prospect of arriving home drenched after a 12-hour shift was disheartening. "Thank you," she said, quickly getting into the car. The interior was as luxurious as she imagined, soft leather and the subtle scent of a discreet cologne. The initial silence was almost palpable. Caroline gave her address, and Michael programmed the GPS, though he seemed to know the city well. The first few blocks were covered only by the sound of rain and windshield wipers. "Thank you for the stethoscope," Caroline finally said. "It's an excellent instrument, but I'm afraid it's too valuable a gift to accept." Michael kept his eyes on the road. "It's not a gift. It's an investment in my daughter's health." The answer caught her by surprise. It wasn't what she expected to hear. "Even so," she insisted, "there are hospital protocols regarding gifts from patients, and there are many professionals caring for Isadora, not just me." Michael turned a corner before replying, "What you've done for Isadora cannot be measured by protocols, Miss Adams. Or may I call you Caroline?" "Caroline is fine. You reached her when no one else could." His voice held a vulnerability that contrasted with his imposing appearance. "Since Marina left us, Isadora has closed up like a shell. Not even our housekeeper, Mrs. Louisa, who has known her since she was a baby, can get her to speak." Caroline felt the weight of those words. "Children deal with loss in different ways," she said softly. "Some withdraw because they don't know how to express what they feel." Michael nodded, his fingers lightly gripping the steering wheel. "You speak like someone who understands this personally." The comment was a disguised question. Caroline felt exposed, as if he could see through the carefully constructed layers around her. For a moment, she considered telling him about Bianca, about the song they shared, about how she understood Isadora's pain, because she carried a similar pain. But she held back. "I have experience with pediatric patients," she replied simply. Michael seemed to accept the answer, though his eyes indicated he perceived more than she admitted. As they arrived at Caroline's building, the rain had lessened to a light drizzle. "Thank you for the ride," she said, preparing to get out. "Caroline," Michael called, making her pause. "Regardless of the protocols, I would like you to continue using the stethoscope, please." There was a thinly veiled plea in his request. Caroline nodded, unable to refuse, and got out of the car. She stood on the sidewalk, watching the luxurious vehicle drive away down the narrow street. Something in the way Michael pronounced her name echoed in her mind all night. In the following weeks, a silent routine established itself among Caroline, Isadora, and Michael. The nurse became a constant presence in room 207, adjusting her schedule to coincide with the times when the girl showed greater agitation. Michael, in turn, began to appear not only at the end of the day, but also in the mornings, always bringing a different book for his daughter. It was during one of these mornings that Caroline arrived and found Michael reading aloud to Isadora. The scene was so intimate and delicate that she hesitated at the door, reluctant to interrupt them. The businessman, always so formal, had taken off his jacket and loosened his tie. His eyes, usually serious and distant, sparkled as he brought to life the characters in a story about a sea turtle. "Excuse me," Caroline murmured when she was noticed. "I can come back later." "No?" Michael replied, adjusting in his chair. "We were waiting for you, weren't we, Isadora?" The girl didn't respond verbally, but her eyes lit up when she saw Caroline. That small gesture spoke more than any words. "Actually," Michael continued, "I was wondering if you could give us an opinion." He showed 3 books on the bedside table. "The librarian at the store recommended these for her age, but I don't know which would be most suitable for the moment." Caroline approached, examining the books carefully. She felt a strange intimacy in the situation. She was being consulted not as a nurse, but as someone whose personal opinion mattered. This one she chose, picking up a book with delicate illustrations of a girl building a garden. It has illustrations she can explore even when no one is reading. And the story talks about growth and patience. Michael took the book, his fingers briefly touching hers. "A good choice," he said with a discreet smile. "Do you like literature?" The question caught Caroline by surprise. "Yes," she admitted. "It has always been my refuge." "Any preferred genre?" "Magical realism," she replied without thinking. "Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Virginia Woolf." Something changed in Michael's gaze, a spark of recognition, as if he had discovered something valuable. "Marina loved Virginia Woolf," he commented, his voice softening as he mentioned his wife. "She had the entire collection." The moment was interrupted by Dr. Renee, who entered for the morning examination. Caroline stepped back, resuming her professional role, but felt Michael's gaze following her as she organized Isadora's medications. 2 days later, upon arriving for her shift, Caroline found a wrapped package in her locker. This time there was an official Pages and Tales card. Upon opening it, she found a rare edition of Virginia Woolf's short stories, with a leather binding and gilded pages. The card simply read, "For your moments of refuge, MT." That gesture crossed the boundaries of the professional. Caroline felt her heart quicken, torn between the pleasure of such a personal gift and the concern about what it might mean. Julia, who was changing in the locker room, noticed her expression. "Another gift?" she asked, approaching. When Caroline showed her the book, the older nurse frowned. "Carol, this is getting too personal. He's a hospital client, the father of your patient." "I just mentioned I liked the author," Caroline defended herself, though she knew Julia was right. "I didn't ask for anything." "I'm not saying you did. I just think you're entering dangerous territory. He's Michael Taylor. He lives in another sphere." Caroline carefully put the book in her bag. "It's just a book, Jules, nothing more." But throughout the day, while caring for Isadora and other patients, Caroline couldn't stop thinking about the gesture. There was something intriguing about Michael Taylor, the way he oscillated between corporate formality and moments of genuine vulnerability. The way he looked at Isadora, with a mixture of deep love and helplessness in the face of her silence. At lunchtime, Caroline went to the hospital cafeteria. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice someone's presence until she heard a familiar voice. "May I join you?" Michael was standing beside the table holding a tray. Without his jacket and with his shirt sleeves rolled up, he seemed less intimidating, almost ordinary. "Of course," she replied, trying to hide her surprise. "Isadora is sleeping," he explained, sitting down. I thought I'd take the opportunity to eat something decent, instead of the sandwiches I've been bringing. The comment was so mundane, so human, that Caroline felt an invisible barrier dissolve between them. "Thank you for the book," she finally said. "It's a beautiful edition." Michael nodded, methodically cutting his steak. "When you mentioned the author, I remembered we had this edition at the main bookstore. Limited edition, only 100 copies. Caroline felt her face warm. "It's a very valuable gift." "Consider it a form of thanks for what you've done for Isadora," he interrupted. Then, after a brief hesitation, he added, "and a way to apologize for my initial distant behavior." "There's no need to apologize. I understand you're going through a difficult time." Michael put down his cutlery, looking directly at her. "The truth is, I don't know how to act. Since Marina left, everything has become confusing. How to balance the company, Isadora, her absence." He paused, as if surprised by his own sincerity. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm saying this." "Sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers," Caroline replied gently. "You're not a stranger anymore," he said, with an intensity that surprised her. The moment was interrupted by Caroline's pager. It was an urgent call from the pediatric ward. "I have to go," she said, getting up quickly. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" The words came out abruptly, surprising both of them. Michael immediately seemed regretful. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. Forget the invitation." Caroline hesitated, the pager still beeping insistently. "I have a shift until 9, she replied, before she could think better of it. A small smile appeared on Michael's lips. "I can wait." The rest of the day passed in a blur for Caroline. The urgent call was for another patient, a boy with severe asthma who needed quick intervention. Then there was the normal routine, medications, vital sign measurements, reports. But her mind kept returning to the conversation with Michael and the dinner invitation. That night, as she changed in the locker room, she confronted her reflection in the mirror. What was she doing? Michael was not only the father of a patient, but a man still clearly tied to the memory of his wife. And she, with her complicated life, her unresolved traumas, her daily struggles to survive, what could she offer? "You're going out with him, aren't you?" Julia's voice interrupted her thoughts. Caroline turned, surprised. She hadn't told her friend about the invitation. "How do you know?" Julia smiled, shaking her head. "The way you two look at each other isn't exactly subtle. And he's waiting outside next to that ridiculously expensive car." "It's just dinner," Caroline defended herself, though even she didn't believe it. "Just be careful," Julia advised more seriously. "Not just with him, but with yourself. You're still dealing with a lot, Carol." Caroline knew her friend was referring to Bianca, to the wounds that hadn't fully healed. "It's just dinner," she repeated, more to herself than to Julia. Upon leaving the hospital, she found Michael leaning against his car as Julia had said. He had exchanged his corporate suit for dark trousers and a navy blue shirt. He looked younger, less formal. "I thought you might have changed your mind," he said, opening the passenger door. "I considered it," Caroline admitted frankly. The restaurant Michael chose surprised her. Instead of the sophisticated place she expected, he took her to a charming Italian trattoria in the Savannah Quarter. The place was cozy, with dim lights and discreetly separated tables. The owner, an elderly Italian gentleman, greeted Michael by name. "I've been coming here since college," Michael explained, as they were led to a table in the back. "I thought you'd prefer something less formal." The gesture showed a sensitivity Caroline hadn't expected. Throughout dinner, between plates of handmade pasta and red wine, the conversation flowed with surprising ease. Michael spoke about his childhood in upstate New York, about how he built the bookstore chain from a small store inherited from his father. Caroline, in turn, shared stories from Crystal Brook, of her struggle to get to college, of the challenges of being a nurse. Carefully, both avoided the most painful topics. He didn't mention Marina, and she didn't talk about Bianca. "How did your love for literature begin?" Michael asked as they shared a tiramisu dessert. Caroline hesitated. The answer involved Bianca, and she had decided not to touch on that subject. But something in the atmosphere, in the wine, in Michael's proximity, lowered her defenses. "My sister," she finally replied. "Bianca read to me every night, even when we didn't have enough for dinner. She invented stories, transformed our difficult reality into something magical." Michael noticed the change in her voice. Are you two still close? Caroline looked at her wine glass, gathering courage. She passed away 3 years ago. A rare illness that started with simple symptoms but progressed rapidly. Michael was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. The song you sing to Isadora? It was hers, Caroline completed with a small, sad smile. Bianca used to sing it to me when I had nightmares. A silent understanding passed between them. Two people united by the experience of loss, by the void left by a loved one. Marina also sang to Isadora, Michael finally said. Not exactly the same melody, but similar. When I heard you singing, it was as if... He stopped, unable to find the words. As if the past and present connected for a moment, Caroline completed, understanding perfectly. On the way home, the silence in the car was different, no longer awkward, but comfortable as between old friends. When they arrived at Caroline's building, Michael turned off the engine. Thank you for tonight, he said, turning to look at her. It's the first time in a long time I felt present. Caroline understood what he meant. Me too. There was a moment of tension, a possibility hanging in the air. Michael leaned in slightly, but then pulled back, as if he had remembered something important. Good night? Caroline, he said gently. Good night. Michael. Upon entering her apartment, Caroline felt simultaneously exhausted and alert. Dinner had been pleasant, more than she expected. There was an undeniable connection between them, born not only of attraction, but of a mutual understanding of the pain of loss. The next day, upon arriving at the hospital, Caroline was immediately called to Dr. Renee's office. Her heart raced, thinking that perhaps someone had seen her with Michael and reported the encounter as inappropriate. But the reason was different. Isadora had shown significant improvement overnight. For the first time in months, the girl had spoken. Only one word, but still an important milestone. She asked for you, Dr. Renee explained with evident satisfaction. She said Carol clearly when the night nurse tried to give her the medication. The news filled Caroline with a joy she hadn't felt in a long time. She hurried to room 207, where she found Isadora sitting on the bed drawing. Michael was by her side, answering emails on his laptop. Upon seeing Caroline, his eyes sparkled with something more than gratitude. Good morning, Caroline said, trying to keep her voice professional despite the emotion. Carol, Isadora exclaimed, lifting her head from her drawing. Her voice was small and a little hoarse from disuse, but perfectly clear. Caroline felt tears well up in her eyes. She approached the bed and hugged the girl carefully. Good morning, little one. Michael watched the scene with evident emotion. She hasn't stopped asking for you since she woke up, he commented, closing his laptop. I think we have an official favorite. The following days brought continuous progress. Isadora spoke more and more, initially only with Caroline and Michael, then gradually with other team members. The evolution was so impressive that doctors began to discuss the possibility of hospital discharge. For Caroline, it was a period of contradictory emotions. Isadora's improvement filled her with joy, but it also meant the girl would soon leave the hospital. Her contact with Michael, which had become more frequent and personal, would inevitably diminish. One afternoon, while helping Isadora assemble a puzzle, Caroline noticed Michael watching her with a thoughtful expression. Is everything okay? She asked when the girl became distracted with a coloring book. I'm thinking about what will happen when we go home, he replied in a low voice. Isadora has gotten used to your presence. The transition will be difficult. Caroline nodded, understanding his concern. It's normal at that age, but she's resilient, she'll adapt. I've been thinking, Michael continued hesitantly. Perhaps we could find a way to keep you present in her life, even after discharge. Caroline's heart raced. What do you mean? We could start with occasional visits, maybe on weekends, so the transition isn't abrupt. The proposal was tempting, but Caroline knew the risks. It wasn't just her professional relationship with Isadora that was at stake, but also the feelings she was beginning to develop for Michael. I'd need to think about it, she replied cautiously. There are ethical issues to consider. Michael seemed disappointed but accepted the answer. Of course, I understand. Just please consider it. That night, Caroline talked to Julia about the proposal. Her friend, as expected, expressed concern. Carol, you're falling for him, aren't you? Caroline didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. And you think it's a good idea to maintain contact with the family outside the hospital environment. Where will this lead? It's not about me and Michael, Caroline defended herself. It's about Isadora. She's been through enormous trauma. She's just starting to open up again. Julia sighed, skeptical. If you say so. But remember that children get attached easily. If you enter her life and then leave, it will be another trauma. Julia's words weighed on Caroline for days. She knew her friend was right. There were risks for everyone involved. But at the same time, the thought of simply disappearing from Isadora's life after discharge was too painful. A week later, the decision was taken out of Caroline's hands by an unexpected event. Upon arriving for her shift, she found an unusual commotion in the pediatric ward. Nurses and doctors spoke in low voices, with worried expressions. When she finally got information, her stomach dropped. During the night, Isadora had suffered a severe relapse. Her respiratory condition had suddenly worsened, requiring intubation and transfer to the pediatric ICU. Caroline rushed to the ICU, where she found Michael sitting in an uncomfortable chair, his face pale and distraught. When he saw her, he immediately stood up and without a word hugged her tightly. Caroline felt his body tremble slightly, holding back tears. "What happened?" she asked when they finally separated. "No one knows for sure." She was fine until she suddenly started having difficulty breathing. In minutes, her saturation dropped drastically. Michael's voice was a hoarse whisper. "They're doing new tests, suspecting a previously undetected pulmonary complication." Caroline looked through the ICU glass, where Isadora was connected to monitors and machines. The sight was devastating. The girl who just days before was talking and drawing, now motionless and pale under cold lights. "I'll find out what's happening," she promised, squeezing Michael's hand. Using her position as the case nurse, Caroline gained access to Isadora's medical records and new test results. She consulted Dr. Renee and other specialists, trying to understand what could have caused the sudden worsening. The initial suspicion of complicated pneumonia did not seem to be confirmed by the tests. It was only at the end of the day, meticulously reviewing Isadora's entire medical history, that Caroline noticed something strange. Comparing the results of the most recent tests with previous ones, she noticed subtle discrepancies that didn't make sense with the current diagnosis. Caroline spent a few hours studying the tests until she identified the problem. There were traces of an unprescribed substance in Isadora's blood. It wasn't something that would appear in routine tests, but the more complete test done after the crisis revealed its presence. Her heart raced as she understood the implication. Someone might have administered something inappropriate to the girl. Without knowing who to turn to with such a serious suspicion, Caroline sought out Dr. Renee in her office. The doctor, known for her professionalism, listened attentively as Caroline explained her findings. "It's a serious accusation, Caroline," the doctor said after a long silence. "Are you suggesting that someone in the hospital administered an unprescribed substance to a patient?" "The results indicate that," Caroline replied, showing the notes she had made. "The substance has a sedative effect, but in excess it can cause respiratory depression, exactly what happened to Isadora." Dr. Renee examined the documents carefully. "I will request an immediate and discreet internal investigation. In the meantime, I want you to remain silent about this. Don't even tell Mr. Taylor yet. We need concrete facts." Caroline agreed, though the idea of hiding something from Michael deeply bothered her. She returned to the ICU, where he continued his vigil. Now accompanied by a man she didn't know, well-dressed with features similar to Michael's, but a harder expression. "Caroline," Michael called when he saw her. "This is my brother, Paul Taylor. He's the company's vice president, and came as soon as he heard about Isadora." Paul extended his hand formally. His grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Michael talks a lot about you. It seems we have a lot to thank you for." There was something in his tone that made Caroline uncomfortable, a superficial courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. "I just do my job," she replied, maintaining a professional tone. "Mr. Taylor, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Michael followed her to a secluded corner of the corridor. "Any news about her condition?" Caroline hesitated. Dr. Renee's order was clear, but looking at Michael, exhausted and devastated, she couldn't keep the secret. "We found something strange in the tests," she said in a low voice. "A substance that shouldn't be there. Dr. Renee is initiating an internal investigation. Michael paled. Are you saying someone did this intentionally? We don't know yet. It could have been a mistake. Contamination. Her voice trailed off, unable to believe her own words. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of contained despair. Who would have access to her medications? Anyone on the medical and nursing team. Also visitors who stay alone in the room. Caroline hesitated before asking, Does your brother visit Isadora frequently? The question seemed to surprise Michael. Paul? Rarely. He and Marina never got along, and since she passed, he's distanced himself even more. This is the first time he's come to see her in the hospital. He studied Caroline's face. Why do you ask about him? Caroline shook her head, regretting the insinuation. Just trying to map who had access to the room in recent days. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply anything. At that moment, Caroline's pager beeped, an urgent call from another patient. I have to go, she said reluctantly. I'll be back as soon as I can. Don't worry, the ICU team is excellent. Michael gently held her arm. Thank you for telling me. I know you probably shouldn't have. Caroline just nodded, feeling the weight of her choice. She had trusted Michael, but had it been the right thing to do? Throughout the next day, a discreet investigation began at the hospital. Samples were collected, medication records reviewed, and access to Isadora's room limited to a reduced team. Caroline, being close to the patient and family, was temporarily removed from direct care, a standard measure in investigations of this type. The removal left her distressed. Without access to the ICU, she relied on Julia for information about Isadora's condition. Michael also seemed distant, absorbed in meetings with doctors and hospital administrators. It was during this period of uncertainty that Caroline received an unexpected call. It was Anthony, an old college colleague who now worked at the University Hospital of New York City, one of the country's largest medical centers. Carol, I have a proposition for you, he said after the initial greetings. We're expanding the pediatric nursing team here, and your name was recommended. It would be a supervisory position, with a significantly higher salary, and the possibility of completing your master's degree with a full scholarship. The offer was surprising and, at any other time, would have been a dream come true. But now with Isadora in the ICU and the complications with Michael, the idea of leaving Brighton Hill seemed impossible. I need to think, Anthony, she replied sincerely. I'm involved in a complicated situation here. I understand, but don't take too long. We need an answer in 2 weeks. It's a unique opportunity, Carol. You always wanted to work in clinical research. After hanging up, Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, her mind in a whirl. It was true. She had always dreamed of working in research, of contributing to advances in pediatric nursing. New York City offered that possibility, in addition to solving her financial problems. But now there was Isadora. And Michael. The next morning, Caroline was called to the hospital administration office. Her heart raced, fearing that the summons was related to the investigation or her involvement with Michael. To her surprise, she found not only the hospital board, but also Dr. Renee and Michael. Miss Adams, thank you for coming, began the administrative director. Dr. Marcus, we have news about patient Isadora Taylor's case. Caroline looked at Michael, who seemed simultaneously exhausted and relieved. Dr. Renee took the floor. The investigation identified the origin of the substance found in Isadora's system. It was not a malicious administration, but rather a rare adverse reaction to the combination of 2 medications she had been receiving. The cumulative effect created a compound that, in her specific case, caused respiratory depression. Caroline felt immense relief. There had been no sabotage, just an unexpected drug reaction. However, Michael's expression suggested there was more to be said. Thanks to your quick observation, Dr. Renee continued, we were able to identify the problem in time. The medication protocol has been adjusted, and Isadora is already showing signs of improvement. She was extubated this morning. Michael stood up, visibly emotional. Caroline, I have no words to thank you. You saved my daughter, twice. The administrative director cleared his throat, regaining control of the meeting. Miss Adams, your clinical acumen and exemplary dedication have not gone unnoticed. Mr. Taylor has expressed a desire to create a special psychological support program for hospitalized children, inspired by the work you developed with Isadora. We would like you to lead this project. The proposal caught Caroline completely by surprise. It was an incredible opportunity, a project in her area of interest, with adequate resources and professional recognition. But there was the offer from New York City, which she needed to consider. I'm honored, she replied cautiously, but I need some time to think. Dr. Marcus seemed surprised by her hesitation. Of course we understand, but know that funding is already secured and the project would start in a month. After the meeting, Michael asked to speak with Caroline privately. They walked to the cafeteria, now almost empty in the late afternoon. You don't seem enthusiastic about the project, he observed after they ordered coffee. Caroline hesitated, uncertain about how much to reveal. It's a wonderful proposal. It's just that I received another offer, a position at the University Hospital of New York City. Michael was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. I understand. It's an important opportunity for your career. It would be pediatric nursing supervision, with the possibility of completing my master's degree, she explained. Feeling strangely guilty, Michael nodded slowly. You deserve that. More than anyone I know? There was a resignation in his voice that tightened Caroline's heart. She had expected, what? For him to ask her to stay? To declare feelings that both had only hinted at in glances and restrained gestures. How is Isadora? She asked, changing the subject. Michael's face lit up slightly. Better, awake, asking for you. Can I see her? Of course. In fact, she insisted I find you and bring you to her immediately. He smiled, the first genuine smile in days, demanding like her mother. Together they headed to the pediatric ICU. Isadora was sitting in bed, still connected to monitors, but visibly more alert. When she saw Caroline, her eyes lit up. Carol, she called, her voice weak but animated. Caroline approached, holding the pale little hand. Hi, little one. How are you feeling today? Better. The nurse let me feed the fish in the aquarium by the entrance. The child's naturalness and innocence brought Caroline back to the present, reminding her of what truly mattered. Regardless of Paul's maneuvers or business complications, there was Isadora, a child who needed stability, love, and security. After helping Isadora settle back into bed, Caroline turned to Michael. I need to complete my shift. Shall we talk later? He nodded, his eyes communicating much more than words could. At the door, Caroline was stopped by a question from Isadora. Carol, have you decided if you're going to live with us? The innocent question made Caroline blush. Isadora, it's not quite like that. But Daddy said he invited you to stay with us. Michael intervened gently. I said I invited Carol to think about working more closely with us, sweetheart. Not exactly living with us. That would be a very big decision. Isadora looked confused. But you said she was special, that she made you feel things in your heart again. Michael's embarrassment was visible, but there was also a raw honesty in his next words. Yes, I did say that. And it's true. Caroline felt her heart race. It was the most direct confirmation of his feelings so far. Looking at Michael, she saw vulnerability and hope in his eyes. We need to give Carol time to decide what's best for her, he continued, without averting his gaze. Some decisions can't be rushed. Isadora seemed ready to protest, but was distracted by the arrival of Dr. Renee for the daily examination. Caroline took the opportunity to leave, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the last few hours. During the remainder of her shift, she tried to concentrate on her other patients, but her thoughts kept returning to Michael, Isadora, and the decision she needed to make. The offer from New York City represented professional advancement, financial security, the chance to complete her master's degree. Staying in Brighton Hill meant the hospital project, something that could truly make a difference in the lives of many children, and the possibility of exploring her feelings for Michael, of being part of Isadora's life. At the end of the day, physically and emotionally exhausted, Caroline headed to the locker room to change. Upon opening her locker, she found a small envelope with her name on it. Inside was a card with Michael's now familiar handwriting. I need to resolve some issues with Paul. Can we meet at 8 p.m. in the hospital garden? It's important, Michael. The hospital garden was a small oasis of tranquility, created years earlier for recovering patients and their families. At that hour of the night, it was practically deserted. Caroline found Michael sitting on a bench under a flowering tree, his suit replaced by dark trousers and a simple blue shirt. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing up when he saw her. "Is everything okay? How was the conversation with Paul?" Michael indicated the bench beside him. "Tense, as expected. He didn't take the will's provisions well. He threatened to contest it legally, but we both know it would be futile. What will he do now? He'll probably try to sell his share of the company. Paul was never really interested in books or the essence of the business. For him, they're just numbers." Caroline nodded, understanding. "And for you? What does the company mean?" A soft smile appeared on Michael's lips. "It's Marina's legacy. Her passion was always to share stories, to create spaces where people could discover new worlds through books." There was so much love in his voice when he spoke of his wife that Caroline felt a pang of insecurity. How could she ever occupy a space in the heart of a man who loved so deeply, even after the passing of his partner? As if reading her thoughts, Michael continued, his voice softer. "You know, in the letter, Marina wrote something I can't forget. She said, 'True love is not a finite quantity, Michael. Don't worry about saving all your love for Isadora and for my memory. There's always more to give, always more to discover.'" The words echoed in Caroline's heart, bringing tears to her eyes. She seemed like an extraordinary woman. She was, Michael confirmed, and I'm sure she would have liked you very much. Not just for what you did for Isadora, but for who you are. Caroline looked down, touched by the comment. "I'm still trying to figure out who I am, to be honest. For so long I was just the girl who lost her sister, the student struggling to survive, the nurse trying to make a difference. And now?" She looked at the stars visible through the tree branches. "Now I wonder if I can be more. If I can allow myself to dream of something beyond survival." Michael took her hand, his touch gentle and firm at the same time. "That's what I came to talk to you about. I don't want you to feel pressured or influenced by the situation with Paul or Isadora's needs. Whatever you decide, New York City or the project here, it needs to be for yourself." Caroline felt the weight of his words, the generosity behind them. "And if I choose New York City, then I will celebrate your achievement and miss you very much," he replied honestly. "And perhaps if you allow it, we'll find ways to stay in touch. And if I stay," Michael looked at her intensely, "then we will do everything possible so you never regret that decision. The hospital project will be shaped according to your vision. And as for us, we can discover it together, at a pace that is comfortable for you." It was a sincere promise, without pressure or unrealistic expectations. Caroline felt something settle within her, not exactly a decision, but the clarity that whatever her choice, it would be respected. At that moment, something unexpected happened. A soft song began to play, coming from a small speaker hidden among the bushes. Caroline immediately recognized the melody. It was Bianca's song, the one she sang to Isadora. "How?" Michael smiled, standing up and extending his hand. "I asked Isadora to sing it for me, recorded it, and asked a musician to create an arrangement. I hope you don't mind." Caroline accepted his hand, standing to face him. "It's beautiful." "I thought we could dance," Michael suggested shyly. "Under the stars, like in the movies Isadora loves." The suggestion was so unexpectedly romantic that Caroline couldn't suppress a smile. "I don't know if I'm a good dancer. Neither am I, but we can find out together." And so, in the small hospital garden, under a starry winter sky, Caroline and Michael danced slowly to the sound of the song that had connected their stories, their pains, their hopes. Her body fit naturally against his, as if there was a space reserved just for her. "I've made my decision," Caroline whispered, as the music came to an end. Michael pulled back slightly to look into her eyes without asking what it was, just waiting for her to share when she was ready. "I'm staying," she said simply, "not just for the project or for Isadora, but because for the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong somewhere, to someone." The emotion on Michael's face was palpable. Slowly, as if giving her all the time in the world to retreat, he leaned in and touched her lips with his, a soft, gentle kiss, full of promises of a shared future. The following Monday, Isadora was discharged from the hospital. Caroline, officially removed from the case due to her personal relationship with the family, was still present, not as a nurse, but as a friend. A friend who would soon become much more. As she helped the little girl dress in normal clothes for the first time in weeks, She noticed how the girl seemed simultaneously excited and apprehensive. "Are you excited to go home?" Caroline asked, buttoning Isadora's colorful coat. "Yes, but what if I get sick again?" The worry in her voice was touching. Caroline knelt to be at her eye level. "Remember the story of the sea turtle your dad read? How she had to be very brave to swim in the immense ocean." Isadora nodded, remembering the story. "Sometimes we get sick. It's part of life, but we will always have people who love us to take care of us. Your dad will be there, and I will too whenever you need me." The answer seemed to calm the girl. "Promise?" "I promise," Caroline replied, with all the sincerity of her heart. Michael entered the room at that moment, carrying a small bag with Isadora's belongings. His eyes met Caroline's, and a silent smile was exchanged. The kind of communication that only exists between people who share more than words. "Are we ready to go?" he asked. Caroline nodded, picking Isadora up. "Completely ready." Leaving the hospital was a moment of contained celebration. Nurses and doctors who had cared for Isadora appeared to say goodbye. Dr. Renee made sure to give final instructions and schedule follow-up appointments. Julia appeared with a small bouquet of flowers for the girl. As they walked to the parking lot, Caroline felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was relief for Isadora's recovery, joy for the new phase beginning, but also a hint of melancholy for closing such a significant chapter. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How life changes so suddenly," she replied, watching Isadora run a few steps ahead of them, excited by her newfound freedom. "2 months ago I was just a nurse struggling to pay the bills. Now?" he encouraged. Caroline smiled, feeling a certainty she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Now I'm part of something bigger." "Of a family." Michael stopped, turning to look at her directly. "Yes, you are." "If that's what you wish." "It's what I wish," she confirmed, without hesitation. At that moment, Isadora ran back to them, holding something she had found in the garden near the parking lot. A small yellow flower, growing solitary among stones. "Look, Carol, it's for you." Caroline accepted the gift, touched by the simplicity and sincerity of the gesture. "It's beautiful. Do you know what this flower represents?" Isadora shook her head, curious. "Hope. The ability to grow even in the most difficult places." The girl smiled, satisfied with the explanation. She took Caroline's hand with one of hers and Michael's with the other, naturally uniting them as they walked to the car. 3 months later, the project envisioned by Caroline became a reality. The Sunroom, a space dedicated to the psychological and emotional support of hospitalized children, was inaugurated with a small ceremony. The environment, decorated with vibrant colors and filled with books, games and art supplies, quickly became a refuge for young patients undergoing prolonged treatments. Caroline, now the project director, had assembled a multidisciplinary team that included psychologists, occupational therapists, and trained volunteers. The space also housed a storytelling program where family members and hospital staff could read to the children. "It was faster than I imagined," she commented to Michael during one of his visits to the space. "Normally, projects like this take years to get off the ground." Michael smiled, watching Isadora, who regularly came as a junior volunteer, helping to organize the children's books. "Let's just say some doors open more easily when you know the right people." Caroline knew he had moved mountains behind the scenes, using his influence to expedite approvals and secure adequate funding. But the project's success was genuinely hers, her vision, her dedication, her ability to transform pain into care. As she observed the space full of life and purpose, Caroline thought of Bianca. How she would have loved to see this, a place where children in difficult situations could find comfort and hope. In a way, the Sunroom was as much a tribute to her sister as it was a gift to Isadora and all the children who would come after her. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing her distant gaze. "How strange the path that brought us here is," she replied. "So many losses, so much pain, and yet here we are," he completed, holding her hand, "creating something new from what remained." Caroline nodded, squeezing his hand in response. She had learned that grief was not something to be overcome, but rather integrated into one's very existence. That honoring those who had passed did not mean living in perpetual sadness, but transforming the love she had felt for them into new beginnings. In a corner of the room, Isadora excitedly stood up, holding a colorful book. "Carol, Daddy! I found a book about sea turtles. Can I read it to the children?" "Of course you can, my love," Michael replied with a proud smile. Caroline watched as the little girl positioned herself in a special chair, surrounded by other hospitalized children. With a clear and confident voice, very different from the silent girl she had known months before, Isadora began to read, bringing the words on the page to life. At that moment, Caroline knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. New York City, with all its promises of professional advancement, could never offer this, the feeling of purpose, of belonging, of love she had found here. Michael approached, putting his arm around her waist as they watched Isadora read. The gesture was simple, but full of meaning, a silent promise that together they would continue to build something beautiful from the ashes of the past. "She has her mother's gift for storytelling," Michael commented, with a mixture of nostalgia and joy in his eyes. "And her father's determination," Caroline added, resting her head on his shoulder. "And who knows what else she'll discover in herself, now that she has space to grow." A month later, on a sunny spring afternoon, Michael surprised Caroline with an invitation for a picnic in the city park. Isadora, conspiratorial, had helped prepare the basket with all of Caroline's favorites: grilled cheese sandwiches, fresh strawberries, and those little chocolate truffles she adored, but rarely allowed herself. Sitting on a checkered blanket in the shade of a large tree, with Isadora chasing butterflies at a safe distance, Michael seemed strangely nervous. "Is everything okay?" Caroline asked, noticing how he constantly checked his jacket pocket. "Yes, just—" He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I have something to ask you." Caroline felt her heart race, suspecting what was coming next. "These past few months have been a rediscovery for me. For all three of us, actually," Michael began, holding her hands. "You brought light back into our lives when we needed it most. You not only cared for Isadora, but taught me that it's possible to feel again, to love again without diminishing what came before." He paused, looking in Isadora's direction, who was now observing a small frog with a group of children. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone or to erase your own past. I'm asking you to build a future with us, with all the memories we carry and all the new ones we will create together." From his pocket, he pulled out a small blue velvet box. Upon opening it, he revealed a delicate ring, not a traditional solitaire, but a finely crafted band with small blue stones, like a shimmering river. "Caroline Adams, would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Caroline looked at the ring, at Michael, and at Isadora in the distance. She thought of Bianca, how she would have loved this moment. She thought of all the lonely nights in her small apartment, the exhausting shifts, the daily struggles just to survive. And she thought of the improbable path that had brought her here, a lullaby, a suffering child, a man trying to rebuild himself after loss. "Yes," she replied, with tears in her eyes, but a firm voice. "Yes, I accept." Michael slid the ring onto her finger, and Caroline noticed a delicate inscription on the inside. Looking closer, she read the engraved words, "The sun always rises." "The phrase is from the song," Michael explained, seeing her surprised expression. "The one you sang to Isadora." It seemed appropriate. Caroline felt the tears stream freely now. "It's perfect." At that moment, Isadora ran back as if she had a radar for important moments. Upon seeing the ring on Caroline's finger, her eyes widened. "Did she say yes?" she asked Michael, jumping with excitement. "She said yes," he confirmed, laughing at his daughter's reaction. Isadora threw herself into Caroline's arms, hugging her with all the strength her small arms allowed. "Now you're going to be my mommy too." The simplicity and joy of the declaration touched Caroline deeply. She hugged the girl back, feeling Michael join the embrace, forming a perfect circle of the three of them. "Do you know what this means?" Isadora continued, without waiting for an answer. "It means we're a real family now. And you're never leaving." "Never again," Caroline promised, kissing the top of the child's head. As the sun began to set on the Brighton Hill horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Caroline contemplated the journey she had taken, from the girl who lost her sister to the woman who found a new family, from the invisible nurse to the creator of a space for healing, from loneliness to belonging. It wasn't a happy ending, for she knew that life would continue to bring challenges and uncertainties. It was something better, a new beginning, a promise that, even in the darkest nights, the sun always rises again. And as she watched Michael and Isadora pack up the picnic basket, laughing together in the golden light of dusk, Caroline knew with absolute certainty this was just the beginning of their story together. A story not of replacement or forgetting, but of honoring the past while embracing the future. A story of healing, of hope, and above all, of love, the kind we see and the kind that, even invisible, sustains us through life's storms. Dear listeners, we hope Caroline, Michael, and Isadora's story has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. This family's journey reminds us that even after the greatest losses, there is always room for new beginnings, and that genuine care can transform lives in unexpected ways. If this narrative of healing and new beginnings resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depth of human emotions. Leave your like to help us reach more people with these messages of hope, and share in the comments what city you are watching us from. We have a special playlist with stories of overcoming and love that you can find by clicking on the left. And remember, just as Caroline discovered, sometimes it is in the most challenging moments that we find our true strength and purpose. We'll be back tomorrow with a new story to move your heart.